All right, welcome to today's landlord education series. We have been doing these every month this year, and they are just really great insights for investors. And also, actually, happen to be some property managers interested in these as well, which is actually really great. So each month, I like to bring in a guest expert, and today we have Glenn Ferry from Strata Mediation Services. So, Glenn, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, what I think is great when I first met you was that I didn't actually realize that there was this type of service available for investors that have properties within a strata. So I think that it's really, really good for people to know. And it is one of those things that you don't know what you don't know. So that's what I love about these series. So welcome to everyone that is watching this live and those that will be watching the replay. At any stage you want to reach out to Glenn or myself, feel free to as well. But let's get started with some questions for the next 30 minutes, Glenn. And I'll get you to start off just by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about sort of where you've been and your service that you offer at the moment.
Right. So my name's Glenn Ferry. I started Strata Mediation Services because I thought there was a big gap in the market in the sense of people being able to deal with disputes outside of, say, the state administrative tribunal or other legal channels. I had strata property since I'm about 20, so I've been on the Council of Owners on and off in that property and another property in Claremont for many years, and made lots and lots of mistakes, learned a lot of things. And then I worked for a company called Schindler, which is a lift company. So I worked with the SCA and the strata managers pretty much for the last 15 years on and off, dealing with them with the lift stuff, but also just having general knowledge of strata made it very easy to get on with them and solve problems for them.
Amazing. And so for those that aren't aware from a strata point of view, generally when you're dealing with a strata manager, that strata manager is taking instructions from a council of owners. So I thought that I'd just quickly drop that in so that people understand that as we go through to the first question. So the first question that I've got for you today is, can you give us an overview of what strata mediation is and how it differs from traditional dispute resolution methods, and what are the current options at the moment for dealing with disputes if it's between an investor and their strata manager?
Right. So mediation's mediation. The training I did was the EMAS accreditation, which is through the UWA Law School. And they use that same training for the people that are employed by the State Administrative Tribunal to do mediation. So the mediation process they use is the same as I use, and it's a really good system. And look, I think SAT produce mediate out about just under half of their cases that come through mediation without taking it any further. So it's a pretty effective way to do it. The thing about Strata is there's not many face-to-face meetings. I mean, if you're in business and there's a problem, and this goes with Schindler with lifts and stuff, you have a meeting, you have a face-to-face meeting very quickly. It doesn't seem to happen very often in Strata. The council of owners don't want to do it, and neither do the tenants or the owners, you see, because they don't want to. It's annoying for people who are volunteering to be on the council of owners to have to deal with that, and the strata managers don't necessarily want to do it either. So it tends not to get. So there's no real process. What happens is they tend to have a complaint, they send an email, then it stops there. If they don't want to comply, it doesn't really go anywhere until you end up with either a lawyer's letter or you push through and try and get them into the state administrative tribunal to try and work through the.
And it's pretty unfair, like with that, and it can sometimes feel like a little bit of a bully service where you sort of just have to accept it and move on. And my understanding is, and just correct me if I'm wrong with this, that New South Wales is the only state that currently has an authority body that you can complain to for disputes. Is that right?
I think they actually ask for mediation to be done before they take them to the next level. So
Yeah.
that's the only state that does that right now. So mediations is mandatory before they get anywhere through to another authority. In Western Australia, you've got the State Administrative Tribunal, which is the place where these things are sorted out.
But
So that's
there's
quite
no
effective.
Yeah, but there's no middleman like in a residential tenancies. Like for
No.
those investors, if a tenant or an owner has a problem with us, then they go to DEMAs, and DEMAs would help negotiate and sort it out. Where in
Yeah.
Strata currently, well, for WA and many other states, if you've got a complaint or a dispute, in your mind you've just got to go straight to court or use someone like yourself, which is the mediation.
Yeah. I mean, you've got this Strata Communities Australia in Western Australia. And most of the strata managers, professional strata managers, are actually a part of that association. So you can talk to them. That's one way to do it. And other than that, you can get someone else inside the industry, or then once again go to SAT.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of one that you've had to sort of mediate and yeah, just a bit of a case study?
Yeah, well, we had some people in a rather large like a large strata, and they lived next to each other. And one guy had been there since basically the building was built. The other person had moved in, and they decided that they didn't want to get on with each other, and it started to get very disruptive and very unsettling for basically the whole strata, including them and the whole strata. And they were sort of headed towards, well, they both talked about getting VROs and things like that on each other, which was ludicrous. So the council of owners sort of ran out of options and how to deal with them, but it was affecting everyone else. So then they just reach out and actually employed us to go in there and mediate with them. So it was a good mediation in the sense that they both got to talk to each other in a way they couldn't talk to each other when they're at odds with each other. They just avoided each other and they screamed at each other when they saw each other. It was not very pleasant. But getting them a chance to have that time to sit down and actually discuss and learn about what the other person's situation was, it actually worked through quite nicely in the end, even though it was quite tense. But in the end, they understood the other person wasn't a bad person. They were just reacting to other things that happened. And it's settled it down. They came up with their own solution. That's the beauty of it. They came up with their own solution. So, you know, the council of owners was able to put that dispute to bed because it was bubbling into other things inside that building.
And I get that from a strata manager's point of view. Like, they don't get paid enough to have to deal with
They don't.
personality.
No, they don't. It's not, and it's not necessarily the skill set that they have either. Some of them are really good at sorting out people and disputes, but you know, it's not. You don't go into being a strata manager thinking you have to be a mediator or a dispute resolution person. Not
No,
necessarily.
you don't do that in your course.
No.
We had one which was was a bit of a dispute. We had a tenant in a property. She'd been living in the property for about 10 years. Actually, she might still be living there. And she's not. She was living in the property for 10 years. No complaints from anyone in the strata. Good tenant. Property underneath her got sold and a new person moved in, and he was a grumpy old man that moved into the property. And because she was a nurse and she did shift work, what happened was she did happen to shower sometimes, at 11 p.m. at night, and she would also apparently sort of walk around at odd times. And so there was a massive conflict that happened where he was quite inappropriate, where he would come to the door and he would bang on it and say, why have you showered this time? And it was very confronting for her as a single female. And it was one of those things where it's like, we said to the strata manager, hey, our tenant's been in this property for 10 years. Like, surely it can't be her. Surely he's going to be recognised as a grumpy pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And our owner, fortunately, we had a very good owner where she went and she made sure there was correct underlay in the carpet and she did sort of everything she could. But it actually got to the point where she sold the property because she was like, I just can't be bothered dealing with it. And it's a really, it's a shame when things like that happen. And, unfortunately, in this situation, fortunately, she just ended up selling. But imagine if that person, that tenant, was the actual owner and having to live with that. And I mean, it could have been resolved with, discussing, plumbing issues in the complex or flooring and things like that. But yeah, again, whose responsibility is it to sort it out? Council of owners, strata manager, court.
Yeah, it's tough. I think the strata manager in the middle of it, because they're the people who know what's going on. So the only person that's really going to know what these disputes are going on is the person in the middle, which they send the email to sort the other person out. So that's tend to be how that goes. Someone was complaining. So that guy was going to complain through the strata manager about the other person. So the person to trigger sorting it out, a face-to-face meeting, is going to be that person, because they won't necessarily think that's an option, and they wouldn't even, some people don't think to do that. But actually, it is the perfect option, because then they will dare to confront each other and work through what the problems are, because maybe she could have done things differently if she knew. And the people aren't unreasonable. If they have to work through it, they'll usually work through them. To get to peace to the other side. But they never get into that conversation. They get adversarial because it's all a proxy war between the strata manager and it doesn't get resolved. It doesn't get resolved. So it bubbles.
So those couple of examples have come down to sort of sometimes a bit of a personality issue, but then sometimes we can have a situation where I've had it in an apartment where it's actually been like an ongoing leak, for example, and the strata have tried to find it, and it's actually like the strata manager, I remember, just put their hands up and said it's a building issue, and like we can't do anything more about it. But it was like, well, hold on a second, we've got an owner who's got an ongoing problem every winter. So sometimes these disputes that come out can be more directly to do with the actual building and maintenance and something that's affecting them. Have you got any examples of that? And why is mediation a good thing for those owners to know?
I got a lot of experience with water leaks, unfortunately. The building we own in still leaks, and it's old, so it's got two things going on, and we've found some of them. And the strata manager is in a very difficult position because they're just representing the strata. They're not making the decisions either. So if things aren't getting done and maintenance-wise or being able to solve the problem, there's nothing they can do. And so the only thing you can do is organise a meeting to try and meet someone in the council of owners, or go to the AGM and bring it up, or get involved in the AGM and go and join the council of owners and sort it out. I've had plenty of people try to tell me how easy it was to fix the water problems, and I asked them, well, come on and show me then. You come on on the council of owners, and that can be your one job.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, they don't want to do it. You know, because the people that are doing it are volunteers. So it is annoying for people that have these problems continuously go, but they don't dig into the detail either and go and think, well, maybe I can solve this, so I will solve this by getting involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I had
not remote control.
I had a similar situation the other day. It was actually with a house though, and the tenant was complaining about something, and I actually put it back on him, and I said, listen, he was an older guy. I said, listen, you live there, so you know exactly the function. I said, what do you think would be a good way to solve, this window issue?
Yeah.
And it stopped him in his tracks, and it was really good because when I said, okay, well, here's one option, and he goes, well, no, because that wouldn't be a good option because then I'd lose my security. I said, okay, well, can you give me an option? And it actually stopped the issue that we've got there because he was putting it on me like it was my problem, which it is, but the option that I would have to resolve it is not going to be ideal for him as a tenant in the property. So I think it's actually really good, like what you said, to say to that owner, or maybe as an owner, think to yourself, well, how would you resolve it? Like, instead of just putting this problem back on a strata manager saying, fix it, fix it, fix it. And going to the AGM is probably one of the biggest things that I would say is not happening enough.
It doesn't happen enough.
No.
If there's problems inside the building with things like that, you need to go to the AGM at minimum, absolute minimum. And if you really want to sort it out, join the council of owners and find out exactly what's going on and make some changes if you think you can. Sitting on the sidelines, and I mean, people think the strata manager is the strata. If they don't know much about it, they just think, well, that's the person they're fighting with, so therefore they're the strata. The strata are the owners, the other owners that collectively own the building, and they're the ones you need to talk to.
Yeah, 100%. See, is there something that an owner or an investor can be aware of before they purchase a property to sort of see what the history has been in terms of ongoing maintenance or problems? Is there something there that they should be looking out for as a red flag?
Well, there's plenty of red flags you can look for. I mean, you need to look at the condition. If it's an old building, you want to be looking at whether anything's been done recently in relation to like painting, roofs, air conditioning, water, anything like that. It's come up. If you can look it up in the AGM, the minutes of the AGMs or the AGMs previous to see if there's any big expenditures going on there, and ask for the 10-year plan. If they don't have a 10-year plan, and if they do have a 10-year plan, are they spending against that 10-year plan or saving against it? Because if you've got an old building, all the maintenance that hasn't been done, and this happened to us, is that no maintenance has been done for 40 years. So the roof is gone. First thing's a roof, and then painting the outside of the building, $100,000, $130,000, just went on and on and on because this stuff had never been done because they didn't have any funds. So if you don't have any funds and they don't have a 10-year plan, big red flag. And even if it's a small strata, it still needs a 10-year plan, whether it's a formal one or an informal one. It's madness to think you're not saving against that to actually get maintenance or be able to afford maintenance when it falls due.
Is there a difference between saving against that or spending against it?
Well, you end up in a situation where, say, the roof needs to replace and it needs to be replaced right now, then you're just doing an extraordinary levy. You might even have to have an EGM and an extraordinary to get and raise an extraordinary levy to get the work done. So without
Yeah.
the money there being available for that sort of stuff, it causes a lot of grief. But it's just the actual thought process around you've got to spend money on maintenance. You can't ignore that anymore. I mean, the regulations now want to make sure that people are maintaining the building in a proper manner, not just ignoring it and waiting for someone else to pay later on. So you need to think about what's going to come and how much it's going to cost and start saving against it. Lifts are a classic example. I saw that in my 15 years that people don't think about lifts until it's too late. Once they start breaking down and they're 25, 30 years old and they're breaking down continuously, you're off a cliff because the bits you can't get the parts to fix them. And then the lift stops and people get really excited by that. And it costs
Wow,
them $200,000 to replace them.
Yeah, we've done a couple of we had a couple of tenants in properties with lift replacements, and it's actually one of my number one things I mentioned to owners that are buying in South Perth to say, let me know, because I'll let you know which complexes have had the lifts replaced and which ones haven't, because not only is it an expense, when you've got a tenant who has to climb all those stairs, and it happens to be ironically the same time that tenant decides to break an ankle or something stupid. A nightmare. It's a nightmare, and something you should definitely take into account, because what actually will happen is what we've had to do is we've actually had to have our investors reduce the rent, adjust the rent while there was inconvenience of the lift, and that's going to cost an investor money.
Yeah, if it's a big building and if it's got one lift, then it's a really interesting situation. Two lifts are much better, much more expensive, but much better, because you can replace one while the other one's running. When you've got a 20-story building that's got one lift in it and it's out, it's a terrible situation. The oldest people tend to live on top.
Always. What's with that?
That's about guaranteed.
I was going to say something really, actually, I'm going to say it's really inappropriate, but it's either the older people or it's the drug dealers that live on top for the security.
Yeah.
I've had a couple.
Drug dealers don't complain though.
But not that I'm putting off any investors buying on top floor, but there's risks involved that we keep an eye out for.
So you've got to take those into consideration.
Yeah, totally. The next question for you, so we've talked about the red flags with purchasing property. So like you said, look at the 10-year plan, look at, what the last minutes are shown in terms of works. If there's something that looks like it's ongoing all the time, something to be mindful of. And I mean, even if it's a totally squeaky clean sort of book, it still can have maintenance going up. So probably making sure that you're having a good look at those buildings, and where possible physically check them yourself is going to give you a feel for how maintenance looks like in that complex as well. So when investors are buying a property, so you've mentioned checking the AGM, the minutes. What other things?
The agent should give you the minutes, and they should give you, if they've got a 10-year plan, they should probably be able to get that as well. And they should be able to tell you anything that's ongoing inside the building. Particular, say they're replacing the pool in 2 years' time or something like that. They need to tell you that up front, or anything to do with pets as well. They need to start with that.
I don't know if this is something you can mention or not, because I'm not sure if this is in your lane or not, but from a disclosure point of view, is it up to the buyer to do their own due diligence, or would it be up to the seller and a selling agent to disclose what they know? Or is that a question I should be posing to a sales agent more?
You probably do, but I know that they are a lot more particular about the information they provide, because they need to be. Because if you misrepresent or don't tell someone something significant, it's not going to end well.
Yeah. So who can employ you? Like, are you employed by a strata manager, or are you employed by a landlord or an investor or an owner in that complex?
Ideally, the best person to employ me is actually the council of owners. That way the cost is spread across everyone. Okay. And I'm not theoretically representing one side or the other. Mediation is very much down the middle. I'm there to represent everyone to try and get through to get an agreement, which is a weird position to sit in. Because if you're a lawyer, you're an advocate for that side or an advocate for this side. Whereas I'm trying to advocate for both sides to be able to talk and come through with a solution that I can work with later on. So it's much better if the council of owners employ me to do that, rather than say one of the people who's got an issue on the other side of it employs me, and there's a perception of bias. I mean, I want to try and eliminate that as much as I can. And I'm probably by talking to them, I've drafted a pre-mediation, so I get to talk to them both sides beforehand anyway, so they can understand where I'm coming from, and I get to learn both sides of the equation before we get there. But you want to try and eliminate that. But theoretically, anybody can engage us to do that. I mean, the other thing is meetings. If we do a facilitated meeting, which is sort of a backup from actual full-on mediation, we're just being in a meeting with them. So the council of owners are there, maybe the strata manager's there, and the person that maybe got the issue with them is there, and someone in the middle can just run the meeting, because it's the strata manager's taking instructions from the owners. You know, there's a little conflict in interest there, and the person coming in doesn't want to, or maybe feel uncomfortable about that. They feel like they might be getting ganged up on by the council of owners and the strata manager. With someone else is there just to make it a bit more neutral, it might be a bit more positive.
Yeah, absolutely. So if an investor or an owner does have a complaint with a situation that's happening inside the complex, what sort of information would you be requiring from them? Like, is it a lot of like written evidence, or like what does that look like for you? What's the first thing you would ask someone who had a complaint?
I'd just ask them what's going on and outline the situation. I mean, I'm not. The beauty of this is we're not trying to dig too deeply into the detail. We're trying to get to the people problem, not the technical problem as such. Because usually it's a people problem, and it's usually three reasons deep what the actual reason is that people are reacting and doing what they're doing. So you want to get the dispute resolved at the lowest possible level. So the cheapest, fastest, best way to do it is to take it on a human level and try and get them to explain why they're doing it or what they're doing it for. Are you doing that are you doing that just because you want to annoy them? Is that what you're doing? You know, ask them. If you get them in that situation, you might get the real answer out of them, and then they can work around it. But I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that detailed work, because ultimately, if it goes any further, either the SAT or the lawyers pick it up. They'll do that as well. And I'm more than happy to say that I'm out. It's too technical or it's too legalistic, I'm out.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because I know that from a negotiation point of view, some people I think are just naturally pretty good at it, and then some, you know, are not so good. But I was talking to an owner the other day, and I just said to him, "Listen, I can negotiate and mediate as best I can, and it might work out, and both parties might be happy. But when I can't manage that, and when it doesn't work, and there'll be times it doesn't work, that's when I have to follow the law and the books and say, okay, well, now legally, this is what the situation is, and legally, this is what's going to happen." So I find that, it's always better to get that outcome and negotiate that first, because nothing is worse than someone going to, you know, the person who's already disgruntled and saying, as per section 43 of da 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 da.
Yeah.
It's not going to help any situation.
No.
I mean, sometimes you have to use that, but you use that at the end of everything once you've exhausted.
Yeah, you be nice first, and then you slowly drip out the detail if you need to.
100%, subtly put it in there. But yeah, it's such a big, mediation is such a big part, both to property management and strata management. What I love about what you do is that, I mean, in a property management, what happens if there's a complaint, goes straight to DEMAs get involved, REWA can get involved, and it gets, you know, there's support there for the consumer. But for strata, there isn't. So for the consumer, when they are, you know, when they're getting an answer they don't like, they are just like, oh, I mean, where else do I go? What do I do except for court system, which is obviously quite overwhelming for a lot of people. So it's really important that you know that there is a service that Glenn offers that can help in these situations. And it's good just to know, because I've been in real estate for 20 years and I never knew there was an option. And the number of times that I could have said to my disgruntled owner, listen, if you're still not happy, look at this option. But I didn't know. And it's a very unique position. I don't know many people that are doing this. Like
no one that I've seen, nobody in WA. One or two people over east that do something similar, one in Queensland. But no, nobody specializes in it. And it's probably because my background and having property, had strata property and worked with so many strata managers over time. that it suits me to try to be involved in the property side and the strata side of it.
Yeah.
It's pretty unique.
Yeah, it is. So in summary, I mean, what I see from an investor point of view, what investors are lacking is when they're buying a property, they're not doing their due diligence. They're buying a strata and they're not checking all the, like we said, you know, all the documents in the back end. That's the first probably red flag that people are making.
Yeah.
The second mistakes that I'm seeing investors and stratas making is that they're not paying attention to their minutes when they come through, and they're not attending the AGMs. The number of, like, if I was to take a guess at the percentage, I would say 90%, 80 or 90% of people receive their AGM, don't read them.
Yeah. And look, you spent 500,000, 800,000, $1 million on an asset, and you can't spend an hour once a year.
Yeah.
It seems it's a lot of money to have and take no interest in.
100%. And then the third thing is, being active in the strata. And if you're not happy with something, like you said, get involved in the council of owners. I mean, if you're not sure how much effort it's required to be on the council of owners, you can just speak to your strata manager and just find out a little bit more about if it's quite an active one. My understanding is that some councils catch up once a month. Sometimes it's just emails and ad hoc. Sometimes, you know, they're all a little bit different. Sometimes it's a lot of correspondence, and sometimes it's a little. But if you're not happy with something, or you do have a passion to ensure that your strata is maintained well, because it's, you know, it's an asset that you don't want it to depreciate too much. You want it, you know, to go up. Then stop complaining and be involved in, you know, in the workings of it. I mean, they would be my 3 big takeaways for investors that they're getting wrong.
Yeah, understand the workings of it. True. I mean, you know, it's not, some of those things aren't easy and they do require work, but somebody's got to do it. So it's like 80-20. It's 20% of the owners will do 80% of the work, and that's, you know, if you got great people on the council of owners, it's all good. If you don't have great people on the council of owners, or people that have objectives, you know, of their own agenda, that's when it gets interesting. But you don't know that going in. It's very hard to know that when you buy a property.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good, I think, the council of owners to have a mix of investors and owner occupiers as well. Like, it's good to have a little bit of a mix, because everyone's intentions are a little bit different, aren't they, with what goes on?
Absolutely. Yes.
Glenn, it was wonderful having you. I'm going to put your details on the description for this, so those watching the replay have access to your details as well. Like I said, Glenn's not and Strata Mediation Services is not someone that you're going to need all the time, but you do need to know that there is this service out there if and when the time comes. So I hope that sort of helps understand Strata a little bit more, and the red flags that you should be aware of. Thank you for your time. Please reach out to Glenn or myself if you guys have any questions. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Ashley. See you later.